what's not sustainable ag. We do not want to do anything close to that with frankincense. What we want to do is have a biodiverse mosaic. And so when I visualize growing frankincense, it's growing frankincense interspersed with food, fiber, and medicinal trees. And also annual food crops interspersed into that, so that communities actually buy into having a community plantation or having a plantation that they work at. Why would they otherwise? I mean, unless it's a job and you're going to get paid to water and tend frankincense trees, why would the community living in poverty embrace a farm of frankincense? That's not going to do anything for them right now, because remember, it's going to take at least 10 years to bring those trees to tapping age in cultivation. So sustainable ag, and I don't know if you guys know, but I'm a permaculture teacher, so I'm big into permaculture. It's my savior. You know, I mean, you learn about all the environmental problems in the world and you just want to hide. It's so overwhelming. And then you think human beings are terrible. You think there's something wrong with us. We shouldn't be here. We're ruining the place. Well, in fact, human beings can be co-creators in biodiversity, and we have been. Over many thousands of years, there are examples of human beings creating these mosaics of biodiversity for food, fiber, and medicine, while still allowing for wildlife and ecosystems to exist. So my dream is to plant frankincense along with other indigenous or locally accepted food, fiber, and medicine trees, and also perennial bushes, shrubs, and annual crops like onions. At the nursery, the guys just started growing onions. And I was like, and I never got so excited about onions in my life. You know, I was so excited because they had the baby frankincense trees, and they didn't ask me, or they didn't, they just did it. They just knew it was the right thing to do, was to, hey, they've got this space in the greenhouse. We need onions here. Let's start growing onions. So that's the way to bring frankincense into cultivation in a sustainable agricultural approach, is to intersperse it with other trees that provide food, fiber, and medicine, but also things that can quickly provide benefit to the local communities because they're food insecure, right? So to have a frankincense nursery, you have to have water. You have to have a well. You have to have a rain catchment system. You have to have mist nets. You have to have something to make water. How would that look, or how would that be if we had water just to grow frankincense trees, but not for people or for their livestock who are suffering right next door, or right, in the next community over? So the integrated approach of bringing people in and creating resources that benefit them is how you get them to buy into a long-term effort to grow frankincense. And that's the hope, that's the vision that, the people in the team, and I have so many amazing people from all these different countries across Africa and the Middle East, teaching me, bolstering up this effort and providing input to this effort. I'm not a one-woman show by any stretch of the imagination. Maybe I'm just the one who likes to talk about it more than some of my other colleagues. Plant people, they just want to be outside with the plants, and they're like, I don't want to talk to the people. So they tell me, and they say, you go tell them, that growing these trees is absolutely possible. You might hear from people, some urban legends or urban myths that it's not possible to grow them, or it's not been tried. Well, it is very possible to grow them, and it is possible to grow them so that they will produce resin. There's a certain way to do it. There's ways to grow trees in propagation that will give the same resin as trees in the wild. And so I hope one of the things that, from doing these talks and getting more involved with indie perfumers, is that you guys can, support these efforts and bring your creativity and your artistic minds to help designing this sustainable vision for frankincense. If enough of us come together with a single purpose and vision of what we want to achieve, anything is achievable. Human beings are making these problems. in the world, right? Human beings, right? That's kind of good news. That's good news. You know why? Because it means human beings can actually be the solution too, right? So we could, you know, we're yin yang. We're problem makers and we're problem solvers. You know, we have both of that in all of us, right? Like I have good in me and I have bad in me. I'm aware of it. I'm like, oh, there it is. There's that bad part of me. Okay, there's that good part of me, right? We all have that. So we can all be troublemakers or problem makers and, you know, be a part of destroying the place and hurting each other. Or we can really work this other part of our capacity as human beings. And so since we've made a lot of these environmental problems, that means we can solve them too. We could be part of the solution. So we're not a cancer, we're not terrible, we're not innately bad or something. It's not true. We're young, we're growing up, you know, we're immature as a species. And so we're realizing what our limitations are in the natural world.
That was amazing. And I want to keep that thread. We are here at the COSP. I feel like we're extremely aligned with your vision, and your optimism is it's a bit of a soothing balm, which is really wonderful. What can we do what resources and information can we share with our community, with other perfumers, with other makers, to support your cause, to support the greater cause, to encourage the sustainable harvesting of frankincense and what that all means, right? Like providing these communities with the resources that they need to fulfill their right to live, right? To fulfill their right to live peacefully and healthfully. I know that's kind of a big question and maybe sounds like a bibliography or something, but we can, we'll share those materials as well with people if that we have, and that whatever you're willing to provide. But how can we help?
Yeah.
Beyond what you said.
Yeah. So, I mean, you guys are part of the engine. I mean, you're part of the driving force because you're the creative group, right? And so first things first, you can really help by raising awareness. And I know that, that only goes so far, but it's hugely important because just in the last year, so 2019 was a big year for a lot of information coming out about the state of frankincense. And so myself and Dr. Franz Bongers, who is a professor who's been working on Ethiopian papyrifera, on frankincense that grows in Ethiopia for many decades, are two of the scientists that are really blowing the whistle about the issues around the lack of sustainability and or regeneration in Ethiopia. So he's been telling that story for a while. I've been telling it for a while, but 2019 really was a year where a lot of people started paying attention. It was in the New York Times, it was in National Geographic, it was all these different outlets, news scientists, I mean, Christianity Today, you just keep going through the list. Voice of Africa, Associated Press. That's a critical mass now of awareness starting to spread. I mean, I started the Facebook page for Save Frankincense. We're over 11,000 followers. I haven't really even promoted it. I mean, that's people who just care about frankincense. There's a lot of people who care about frankincense. And so raising awareness is critically important for people in your industry to know, for the wholesalers that you work with. And from that awareness, then we can start to ask for things that we want to see in the industry, that we want to see as industry norms. Yeah. So you can look at the example of coffee a little bit. And, a couple decades ago, no one knew where their coffee came from. There was some guy in a commercial when I was a kid that's the coffee man, right? Or, it comes from that country, right? Now, when we're not playing in this household, we get coffee from, it's certified that it's bird friendly, it's shade grown. I know exactly the community. I know how much they were paid. I mean, I know everything there is to know about the bag of coffee that we get in this household. We can do that with frankincense. We can absolutely do that with frankincense, but we have to demand it. So on this side of the equation, are the buyers and formulators, which are you guys, right? You purchase these raw materials and then you formulate them into these amazing scents. Most of the time you might be purchasing frankincense oil that's already been distilled from the resin, right? You're probably not buying the resin and then micro distilling in your house, but you could. But the wholesalers of the oil or the resins, a lot of them don't even know where the frankincense comes from. There's such a lack of transparency and traceability about where the resins come from. Without that, without having the transparency and the traceability, we can't work on sustainability from this side of the equation, from the purchasing and the formulating, because it's an unknown. It's absolutely unknown. Okay, I know I got Papyrifera, I know the species, I can test the chemistry, but did it come from Ethiopia? Did it come from Sudan? Did it come from northern part? No idea, right? And so without that traceability, so we need to demand traceability in frankincense. And there's ways to do that now, right? One of the things that's very hopeful for me is blockchain, which is a process of uploading data to a cloud that cannot be messed with. The data can't be altered. It's a protected cloud, and that you can literally put barcodes on trees and scan them with a phone and it will upload data about that tree, right? And so we're experimenting. We have some pilots going on this in Burkina Faso with Boswellia dalzielii, which is a newcomer to the frankincense world right now. And it's a new one. It's not really been tapped before or used in West Africa extensively as a resin or an oil. It was the bark. They were using medicinally the bark. We have a whole sustainability project going on with blockchain to be able to absolutely tell people where their resin came from. And what the opportunity for indie perfumers in particular is because you're not trying to get huge volumes. You absolutely can accomplish getting a frankincense source and knowing it. When you start getting into huge volumes where you're getting like 100 tons of frankincense resin, it's harder to trace all that. Now we're gonna have to get there too for the big producers, but indie perfumers in particular have an opportunity to work directly with some of the smaller supplying operations that know or maybe haven't been pushed enough from their buyers, but could set up transparency and sustainability. One of the things I should also mention, is that all the frankincense, whether it's a threatened species or not, are currently under review by CITES, which is the Convention on the Trade of Endangered Species. Frankincense is going to be under review now. The process has started. It's a little delayed because of coronavirus. If that passes, if frankincense becomes a protected species under CITES, where you have to have permits to trade it internationally, part of that is that you have to have transparency so that there can be accountability and checks on the trees. So one of the certification systems that people often turn to for wildcrafted species is Fair Wild certification. And that's something I urge indie perfumers to look at. Now, it's a big process. It's hard to get. It's certainly not something that the communities could pay for. They need their buyers to also kick in for that to make that happen. And there's criticisms about any certification system, but it's the best one we've got right now. And it very likely would be something that would be used along with a CITES regulated plant. So indie perfumers are actually very well positioned because you're not getting huge volumes to work directly with people and suppliers and urge sustainability and transparency. One of the ways that that's done is by paying a sustainability premium, right? So I've seen some people who get very sustainable supplies of frankincense, small scale. they've been working with the same landowner for 10 years. You know, they have a relationship built, they know what they're doing, and they pay them a sustainability premium for reinvesting in protection and care of the trees and monitoring of the trees. It's expensive to constantly have outsiders, and it also doesn't build capacity in country. You want people to be able, in their own communities, to be able to do this for themselves, right? It shouldn't always be bring in Dr. DeCarlo or have somebody come from outside. You do that when it's time for your checkup. But on a day-to-day, we really want to see more capacity in country and in communities for monitoring trees. So now your viewers might ask, or you guys might be wondering, well, tell us, Anjanette, like, where do we go to find suppliers, right? Where do we go? And you know, it's an interesting question for me, because I've worked so hard to keep separate from the buying and selling of frankincense, and trying to work on it as a scientist. Of course, I do work with companies. I've worked with several different companies that have contracted me to look at their frankincense or have supported the science. And I've tried so hard to stay out of that, because then communities don't trust me, or, you know, they think, which can happen anyway, right? They still might think, oh, she's an agent for a company or something like that, not really a scientist. It's understandable. But I could really see a space, and several other colleagues, and this is something maybe we'll develop together, right? Maybe this is something that Save Frankincense can do together with your team, is to really start listing who the people are who are willing to be open and transparent and to do monitoring and to follow the best practices, which we have published. So we have a management guide for the sustainable harvesting of frankincense. So we have a set of how, you know, things that we can measure. And maybe the time has come, you know, not for me directly to get involved in that, but to do that in partnership, to start really listing who those people are who are willing to do business in that fashion. Maybe that day's here now.
We can't say too much about our projects with industry partners, but I think that there's a lot of excellent potential for your suggestion. And I think just to add on to the fact that as independents, we can see and act on things differently than the main body of the industry. You were talking about 2019 being a big year for a lot of publications around the current status or states of frankincense species. One thing I found really frustrating was a lot of perfumery publications talked exclusively about how these frankincense suppliers, or this demand for frankincense, was essential to maintaining the economies of these communities where the frankincense grows, right? But they didn't mention anything about the conflict. They didn't mention anything about how they can't necessarily actually sustain themselves. They didn't talk about the status of the frankincense. It was all kind of it was like this weird, like, keep buying it. People need you to buy it. But it was this kind of weird obfuscation of what the actual situation was.
Well, you just brought up a good point too, that the traceability really shouldn't only be about the trees, right? I'm a little obsessed with the trees, but it should also be that fair payments were made to those communities, right? So I half agree with that statement from the perfume industry, and I saw some of that, right? So I half agree with it. Yeah, I'm not saying people should totally stop buying frankincense. I'm not saying that. I don't advocate for a total ban. It would destroy a lot of people's livelihoods who are already poor, who this is what they have. I mean, I'm not advocating for that. I never have. I'm advocating for some accountability, transparency, and a more sustainable approach. And so I'm not asking you a rhetorical question. Are the communities actually getting by on what they make from selling frankincense? Is the purchasing of frankincense getting down to the community levels, the actual men and women who harvest and sort frankincense? Or is it more staying in the hands of the intermediaries, the middlemen, the suppliers, the country suppliers, and then, of course, the people who formulate it into value-added products making the most? income from it, right? Putting it in a perfume that then sells a very high. So that's my challenge to that. I agree. If we banned frankincense, we'd be hurting a lot of people. But how many exactly? And who exactly? And are the communities really seeing the benefit of their hard work, or are they being robbed? Are they really getting $7.50 per kilo, or are they getting $1? And that really, there's a lot of conflict around that. I get calls from people saying they're being robbed on a regular. Now, I don't know if they are or not. I don't know, but I'm regularly hearing from community members that they are not seeing the profits that they should be seeing from the hard work that they're doing, and that they regularly and routinely complain, and you'll see it in a lot of those media stories, about middlemen and suppliers taking advantage of them, right? Poverty usually also means not having a high level of education, right? You might be very smart, but you might not have the high level of education to understand what's going on in these transactions, right? And so who is really benefiting, I think, is the quintessential question financially from frankincense. And that's just as much a part of the transparency and accountability. And thanks for bringing that up, as the trees. They're both simultaneously just as important, because people who are getting paid well and being and are assured that they're going to be able to sell for several years, they don't have to worry, they've got a long-term contract at a good price, that's incentivizing them to take it easy. A lot of people have told me, when I ask, why are you over tapping? They say, well, if I put 100 taps on this tree, I'm going to get more resin out of this tree. And I said, well, this year you will, but by next year, it's very likely this tree will be dead, right? He says, well, I need it right now because I'm getting such a low price. Anjanette, I'm getting such a low price that I need to get as much resin out of this tree as I possibly can. And so I have seen over harvesting on the low end and also on the high end. And so really we have to find a way here to simultaneously tie those two things together so that it's also who's getting the profits, you know. So I challenge the perfume industry who's already crossed with me, you know, this American lady who's making all this trouble, and you know, and the European market in particular enjoyed many decades and centuries of very low priced frankincense and almost exclusive access to it. The Americans on the scene are more recent, right? There's more demand now for the essential oil industry in the United States, as you know, right? The aromatherapy industry has just taken off. Essential oils have become so popular. They used to be such a niche, small thing. And so Americans entering the scene is more new. So there's also competition between Europeans and American buyers for the best quality frankincense resins, you know, so it's a shakeup. It's definitely a shakeup.
Yeah, if it was possible to create a list, that would be amazing. Because one of the things that we try and provide for the members that we're collecting is a resource list and access to everything that you would need to be a sustainable perfumer, or as sustainable as possible, just from the ground up. So if it's possible to actually create a resource like that, it would be really useful to this community as well.
What if we even did an open call and allowed companies to self-select themselves into that list, right? Like, so we could do a call to action for companies that want to do this. And so some of this is coming along through a new organization formed, the Global Frankincense Alliance. So the Global Frankincense Alliance, which I'm on the board of, is a new entity. It's based in the UK, but it came out of two conferences specifically on frankincense that were held over the last couple of years. The first one in Oman, the second one was in Cyprus at the World Conference on Medicinal and Aromatic Plants. And so the Global Frankincense Alliance is seeking to be a body that brings together the stakeholders globally around frankincense. Save Frankincense is participating in that, and I'm on the board, as I said, but it might even be something that could be done with the Global Frankincense Alliance to allow people to self-select into that, and then have a metrics that has to be confirmed. I mean, there has to be some external confirmation, but unless we roll up our sleeves and we start coming up with viable solutions, we're just going to keep getting what we already have. Right? So it's worth it to everyone in the supply chain to think about what we do here, because it's true. We don't want people to stop buying frankincense and stop using frankincense, and that's not going to happen anyway. I mean, we've been obsessed with frankincense. Humanity has been into frankincense. 6,000 years of recorded history of the human use of frankincense. In fact, it's considered one of the first internationally traded commodities, right? So it was traded from Africa and the Middle East into Europe. There's a queen, I think she's so cool, Queen Hatshepsut. She was one of the Egyptian queens. She was obsessed with frankincense, and she had one of the temples. She built a temple to frankincense. She had frankincense burning 24 hours a day in that temple. She had them bring trees to her from the land of Punt, and it's fabled, and it might be true, that she did cultivate some of those trees in Egypt. And so humanity's really been into frankincense for a long time, and there's always been a trail of wealth associated with frankincense. Right? So the caravans, Petra, for example, part of the wealth that built Petra was the frankincense route. It was part of the trade of frankincense from Oman through Petra out into Europe. And also frankincense was traded across the Silk Route into China. And that's why you see frankincense in traditional Chinese medicine, right? It's one of the parts of traditional Chinese medicine. And in fact, why frankincense is so popular in China is because of that. So we don't want people to stop using frankincense. We don't want people to not buy frankincense. I do sometimes caution people to use it with reverence, right? I sometimes will, depending on the audience, talk about, well, could you substitute something else that you put in your diffuser, right? That's like lemon, which is totally sustainable because it's a byproduct of lemon juice, right? Can you use frankincense very specifically for medical, emotional, or spiritual reasons and contain it there and just use it with reverence? So just don't go like throwing it everywhere. Use it with reverence, right? And so we definitely don't want to cut off this economy. We don't want to stop the frankincense economy. In fact, that might not even work for sustainability, right? That could actually have unintended consequences that could cause more decline of the trees potentially. So we want trade in frankincense. We just want that trade to be ecologically and economically sustainable and fair. So yeah, you actually have buying power, right? Because you're buying it, you can start to exercise the power of your purchasing by demanding transparency and accountability. And the more that people who buy frankincense, I mean even the consumers, right? The end consumer, but especially, the formulators, people creating these amazing products, you're direct buyers. You have a right to start demanding, because there's a lot of people who want to sell their frankincense. Wonderful. Well, I really applaud what you're doing, and I think that it's fantastic, and I'm very pleased that you've asked me to do this interview today. I hope in the future to do more with you, even on other aromatic species, and to look for ways that we can collaborate and combine our efforts. Yeah.
We'd love that.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I would wrap up the interview. I just wanted to say thank you again from all of us. And that was so absolutely incredible, such an incredible, conversation and so much amazing input. And we really look forward to continue working with you.
Great, thank you.